After his body became Sukuna's vessel and he was forced to kill his older sister, Megumi had lost his will to live, although various attempts were still made by the sorcerers to save him. Thanks to cooperation with Todo and Hana, Yuji intends to awaken Megumi's soul, and Yuji will even attack Sukuna through the expansion of his domain. Welcome to chapter 266 of Jujutsu Kaisen. The chapter begins with Yuji's conversation with Megumi. After using the Soul Splitter Dismantle, Yuji managed to attack the connection between Sukuna and Megumi's souls. Perhaps after Sukuna was hit by the Jacob Ladder, Yuji again managed to tap Megumi's soul and communicate with him. But just like before, Megumi refused to get up and fight Sukuna. Megumi again told Yuji to stop fighting for him. But it is in this moment that we finally hear Megumi's heart. Throughout his life, Megumi only had Sumiki as an important figure to him. Megumi has a dream to create a world where Sumiki no longer needs to be tormented. And even if such a world is unattainable, Megumi just wants to maintain their simple life for as long as possible. Simple things like eating home-cooked meals, seeing the sunlight shining on the hanging laundry, to seeing his older sister walking with someone he trusts like Yuji. Megumi admitted that he would feel happy as long as peace remains in his life and in his older sister's. However, now that he was gone, Megumi felt he had no reason to live. Therefore, he refused Yuji's invitation and told him to stop. Hearing Megumi's outpouring, Yuji also revealed his heart about his perspective on the choice of life and death. So, before becoming a sorcerer, Yuji tended not to care about the pain and misery of others. When his grandfather was diagnosed with lung cancer and offered to undergo heavy treatment, Yuji saw his grandfather refusing because he felt his body was strong enough without the need for treatment. At that time, Yuji could only believe without knowing the pain his grandfather had to go through. Even when he heard the option of lethal injection, Yuji also only thought that it was someone else's choice and didn't think much of it. Because Yuji, who was blessed with a strong physique, felt that he would not be faced with that choice. However, since his grandfather died and Yuji was dragged into the world of Jujutsu, he began to witness many moments of life and death of others. And from then on, Yuji began to think about his grandfather, because Yuji's suspicion imagined the real facts if his grandfather died because he chose lethal injection. From here, Yuji began to be able to sympathize with the pain of others. Yuji began to understand that the pain his grandfather experienced when he was diagnosed with cancer probably tormented him a lot. Therefore, at this time, Yuji felt he had no right to force Megumi to continue living. Yuji thinks that maybe the pain Megumi is currently experiencing is also unbearable. So now Yuji is willing if Megumi chooses to die. This means Yuji is ready if he has to kill Sukuna and Megumi too. And in the end, we finally saw Yuji's domain again. As soon as he realized that Yuji's domain attack was active, Sukuna immediately used Hollow Wicker Basket. With his 4 hands recovered, this anti-domain technique became a very effective weapon, because the output of Hollow Wicker Basket and Simple Domain is usually weaker than Domain Expansion. Normally, protection would be destroyed by Domain Expansion attacks. However, for Sukuna, who has 4 hands, he can continue to maintain his activation while fighting. Sukuna also has the option to recover his curse technique through the Gojo method, a method where he uses a reverse technique to his brain. However, Sukuna mentions that this method is too risky. Various risks such as losing control of his body may occur. A physical battle ensued between Yuji and Sukuna. With his 2 hands still free, Sukuna showed his superior physical strength. Initially, Yuji did block Sukuna's kick and stabbed his thigh, but Sukuna was also able to slam Yuji and hit him right in the face until he was thrown. Sukuna admitted that he was deeply offended by the compassion Yuji showed him. Sukuna did not think that being humiliated by others could make him that angry. Therefore, he declared that he would vent his anger on all humans. However, Yuji was not alone. Before his conversation with Megumi ended, Yuji had said something that touched Megumi's heart. With tears in his eyes, Yuji said that he would feel lonely if Megumi was really gone. So even though he admitted that he couldn't force Megumi to continue living, Yuji's deepest heart still didn't want his close friend to leave forever. It was Yuji's words that were ultimately able to galvanize Megumi's resolve. Perhaps this is where he finds a new reason to continue to survive. From within, Megumi rebelled and activated his 10 Shadows technique. And as soon as Sukuna took a step, he suddenly had his feet sucked into a black shadow. Sukuna immediately understood that this was Megumi's doing. Because after Mahoraga was defeated by Gojo, Sukuna claimed that he could no longer use his 10 Shadows technique. So Sukuna knew that after Yuji used the soul-splitting dismantle, Megumi's soul was successfully awakened. Seeing Megumi's action, Yuji smiled, and thanks to the trap, Yuji was able to retaliate by launching a punch into Sukuna's face. Even when Sukuna was thrown, Yuji immediately came forward and beat him with successive punches. Until finally, the two had hit each other right on the head of each opponent. But thanks to the ability of Yuji's punches that could attack the soul, Sukuna began to feel fatal injuries. Because then, Yuji's attacks could not be recovered with the reversed technique. So, if left unchecked, Sukuna will be weakened and no longer able to defend the hollow wicker basket. Realizing this bad situation, Sukuna finally chose to use the technique of returning to the organ in his brain that could restore his curse technique. Sukuna didn't seem to care about the risks involved, even though his control over Megumi's body was weakening. As long as it could kill Yuji, then he would do it. Finally, with Dismantle, Sukuna launched a slash at Yuji's left hand that was ready to send a punch. As a result, the hand armor that Yuji was wearing was immediately destroyed. Not only that, Sukuna also intended to use the expansion of his domain, but at that moment Sukuna saw an oddity in Yuji's fingers. So, after the armor on his hand was destroyed, Sukuna saw the disappearance of 2 fingers on Yuji's left hand and made Sukuna surprised. Finally, in the midst of the confusion, the scene suddenly switches to a place with a staircase circling the interior. In the center of the room, a finger is tied with a rope. So whose finger is it? And what exactly is going on here? And that's the complete chapter 266 of Jujutsu Kaisen, a chapter that explores the characters of Yuji and Megumi. And from this chapter, we can know the hearts of these 2 characters and what is their reason for continuing to survive. This chapter also still focuses on Sukuna and Yuji's fight, but this is where some side factors will start to play a role. Before we get there, let's mention a little about Yuji's domain, which unfortunately still hasn't been shown clarity. After the first phase of Yuji's domain is over, we finally get into the fighting phase. Sukuna immediately used the hollow wicker basket because he knew that Yuji's domain attack had started. However, what is quite unfortunate is that we are not presented with an explanation of Yuji's domain itself. Maybe it's natural because technically the attack is still not really revealed. But I had hoped that we would be told the name of this domain along with the landscape scenery. Maybe some of you are confused about whether this battle between Sukuna and Yuji is still in Yuji's domain or outside the domain. But if we look at the fence beside Sukuna, it is likely that this fence is the one we saw when Yuji threatened Sukuna in the previous chapter. That is, we are indeed still in Yuji's domain. And the scenery and terrain in this battle are part of the interior. Now, according to the teaser, Sukuna and Yuji's battle will enter the climax phase. From this chapter, there are 2 factors that might affect the course of the fight. First, about Megumi, who finally wants to fight. With Megumi's awakening, this will clearly be a valuable help for Yuji. After Megumi was previously able to weaken Sukuna's curse technique output, in this chapter he can even use the 10 Shadows technique to trap Sukuna. So maybe in the next chapter, if Megumi really intends to continue to live, all forms of resistance will be increasingly done in this battle, especially if the expansion of Sukuna's domain here is successfully countered by Yuji. So, at the end of the chapter, Sukuna again intended to release the domain expansion. If this really happens, I'm not sure if Yuji's domain can win. That's why another factor also appeared on the last page. In a place somewhere, there was a finger that was hanging and tied. From the color of the nails and the shape of the finger, this was probably Sukuna's finger. From here, the question arises, why can Sukuna's finger still have one more? Previously, Sukuna had eaten 19 fingers and 1 mummy. Sukuna said that the mummy could replace the power of his last finger. He also guessed that the last finger was in Gojo's hand. But when Yuta appeared and used Sukuna's technique, we might have thought that Rika had eaten the last finger. With the appearance of the last finger here, another possibility has emerged. Moreover, we are also shown 2 of Yuji's severed fingers. The first possibility is that the finger did belong to Sukuna. That means the reason Yuta was able to get Sukuna's technique was by letting Rika eat Yuji's finger instead of Sukuna. This makes sense because Sukuna and Yuji have the same technique. Maybe at that time, Yuji's technique had not really awakened, but that doesn't rule out the possibility that Yuji still let Rika eat his finger because he was aware of his potential power. So after his little finger was cut off when Sukuna moved to Megumi, Yuji also lost his ring finger to Rika. Because Yuji hadn't really mastered the reversed curse technique at that time, he didn't have time to recover the two fingers. That's why when fighting, Yuji wears hand armor, which is probably also a curse weapon. The second possibility is that this is Yuji's finger that has been infused with the former energy of Sukuna's curse. Previously, we know that Yuji is said to be enveloped by the former energy of Sukuna's curse. So what happens if Yuji does the same thing as Sukuna by flowing all his energy into one finger? In that way, Yuji seemed to create an additional Sukuna finger. This finger will be the next part of the sorcerer's plan. So, whether this is the original Sukuna finger or one that originated from Yuji, the likely scenario is that this finger will be something that supports Yuji's fight. For example, by attacking the finger through a technique, Sukuna will take the damage. So from here, there are also those who theorize that Nobara might return, because with his resonance technique, Sukuna can be attacked through that finger. Or if not Nobara, the same thing that happened to Nanami would also be possible. It could be that Nobara's technique has been transferred to a curse weapon and will be used by someone later. There may still be some other possibilities, but the point here is that this finger could be a factor that greatly affects the course of Sukuna and Yuji's battle, especially now that Sukuna is about to release his domain expansion. So it takes one factor so that Sukuna fails to do so, because the current Yuji may not be enough if he has to compete with the Curse King. So what do you guys think? Do you have the same thoughts as me, or do you have another theory? So that's the end and complete discussion of Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 266, iits'Nime. Like and subscribe. See you in the next episode. Bye-bye.